From Tiyami Media, you're listening to Be Bold and Everywhere.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Be Bold and Everywhere podcast. I'm your host, Mike Heffron. Thank you for joining us for this very important episode 1 of the new podcast, Be Bold and Everywhere. I'm really excited. This is something that I've been wanting to get down on media for quite some time. And after months of hesitation and planning, we are finally here, getting this in audio and video form. So if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening, thank you. If you're watching this on YouTube, thank you. If you came over here via the TikTok clips or LinkedIn clips, appreciate you. Thanks for checking it out. Really excited to hear your thoughts, so please give me some feedback as we get into the episodes of this podcast. I really want to increase the quality and just hear from other people what they think just about the way we do things, about the topics that we cover. So apologies in advance if there's any technical mishaps or if I happen to misspeak or something to that effect. We're gonna figure it out. We're gonna tweak it as we go. But this podcast, for those that might not be aware a lot about what I do, this is going to be an entire podcast dedicated to a marketing and business philosophy that's grounded in value. And in how marketing, in its modern formation, the way that I believe that it should be, is really more of a customer experience vehicle as much as it is a revenue generation vehicle. And that's really the goal. So the goal of the podcast is to inspire other creatives and marketers and business owners, entrepreneurs of any kind, to really take a new look at the way that they approach their marketing solution, and see if perhaps by applying a different perspective to that lens through which they view it, that they might be able to improve that in a big way, in a fundamental way as well. This isn't necessarily just sprinkles, but rather throwing the entire Sunday out and starting over, which is a bold choice, hence the name, Be Bold and Everywhere. But I've always been a big believer that bold choices make marketing wins. Timid choices tend to have very timid results, and the fortune favors the bold. So that's why we're here, and we'll be talking in great detail not only about the sort of overall philosophy, the clouds and then the airy sort of esoteric stuff, but a lot of tactics and actionable strategies that hopefully you can apply in different situations. We'll be talking to a good number of guests about their experiences, how they apply these kind of solutions to their specific circumstances, and hopefully that will provide some greater insight, depending on where you are, what industry you're in, whether that be B2B, B2C, D2C. I believe that this marketing philosophy is just fundamental, and we'll be getting into a lot of what that means. But I mean, what it comes down to is we want to tackle the obstacles in front of us, and this kind of content has always helped me to achieve that. So by passing this torch, hopefully I might be able to help somebody else be bold and everywhere that we're doing together. So that's where we really want to take it. One of my big goals when I started Tiyami Media was to overturn the idea that marketing is simply about capturing the demand for your product or your market segment, but rather that creating the demand is really more important because it's the top of the funnel. I feel like too much of a marketing budget is spent at mid-funnel ranges and believing that it's top of funnel. Things like direct marketing, things like field marketing, all of that is important, not to discount that at all, but it's not top of funnel. Top of funnel, in my opinion, is really creating that demand, educating the buyer, brand awareness in general. I come from the entertainment industry, from the music industry, and so a lot of that is creating demand. And if you treat your client like a rock star, like if you were the manager of a big rock band, that drives success because you start thinking about things differently. Instead of thinking about just simple insights, you're thinking about how do we create true fans of what my client does, and that creates lifetime value. which is really the goal. And we'll be going into a lot of that over the next few episodes. I kind of want to distill the main points of how I view things, especially through a marketing fundamental framework. Because that's the reason I wanted to start this business. I guess I'll take it back and I'll kind of introduce myself a little bit, and maybe that might help illuminate how I ended up with the frame of thinking that I have, and why I believe that it has a very important place, especially as marketing shifts in this new post-2020 world. Going into 2020, I had a big belief that a lot of people were going to learn some seriously harsh lessons and take that out of that time and into back into a normal time. But that doesn't seem to be the case. Really, no one has learned that much. They're right back to business. They couldn't wait to get back to normal without realizing that there's clearly a desperate calling for change, and that it works. Whenever anyone does it, it works, and yet they're lauded as some sort of genius of new Steve Jobs, but it's not that way at all. It's fairly basic, as long as you listen to people. If you have an understanding of people, especially your target audience, which should be step one, but yet somehow that step gets consistently skipped over. It's one of the biggest things that businesses and CEOs that I've talked to, they almost have no clear understanding of who their target audience is. They have a basic level, or they have an ideal target audience rather than who is actually the audience. And there's a disconnect there. And I think that comes across and creates mistakes when it comes to activating that audience through meaningful content and messaging. But anyway, my marketing journey started very young. I've always been an entrepreneurial spirit, always wanted to start things, build projects, bring teams together, whether that be lemonade stands, started a little haunted house, anything that I could do, anything I could get my hands in. In school, I was always really big into that, sort of organizing events. Started I didn't personally, but I was one of the founding members of the audiovisual club at my high school, which then took me into studying electronic media in college. And this was in 2008. And so it was a big time for those of you that remember, as far as marketing and media in general, since we were going through the beginning stages of convergence, taking what used to be a very wide media landscape with a lot of different varieties of channels, from radio to print, television, the internet, had reached a state of maturity. But social media was not necessarily in the equation, and the smartphone didn't have the capabilities, but it was beginning to get there. And that was a lot of the conversation from my professors, was around this new convergence where all of that media would be compiled into this one device, where you would watch television programming on a mobile device, where you would read your news and your print media on the device. You would communicate on the device. And that came to pass. As we all well know and see, the smartphone dominates the world. I love my smartphone. I still do it, but I do a lot on desktop. I spend definitely a proportionally larger amount of time on desktop than mobile. And yet when we run campaigns and we get the insights back, it's consistently over 70% mobile response as far as those insights. And even though that is not new, consistently going in and seeing the way that companies are building out their presence as far as mobile is concerned, they're still designing websites primarily for a desktop user, which is just a mistake when 70% or more of your users are going to be viewing this on a mobile device. And yet it's not optimized for mobile. You are not optimizing for 70+% of the audience that will be viewing. And that's just unacceptable. How this has gone on for so long, since 2008, I don't know. But yet here we are in 2022, still not quite adapting to the landscape that is, which is quite bizarre. As a millennial, as someone raised in that net world, that that's just sort of standard. And as we grow and these new audiences emerging, as Gen Z becomes a power buyer, how do you think they are going to go through a buying process? It's not going to be the way that it was. It's going to be the way that it is. And unfortunately, the way that it is still struggles to get the respect that it deserves, for lack of a better word. But I dropped out of college to pursue music full time with my band. We were very gung-ho, and we did a lot of cool stuff over the next 10 years. We toured the country, did a lot of recording, did a lot of playing, hosted a lot of events, and expanded out from just the band in the music industry. So we became show promoters. I worked with a number of promotion companies, was part of a collective that started a music venue for a couple years, through festivals, organized festivals, marketed for other festivals, became a manager of several artists, tour booker. I wanted to touch every piece of that world because I love it a lot. Music has a deep place in my heart, not just as an art form, but as an analogy for life and everything. And it's a wild world because in the music business, you're dealing with one of the most oversaturated markets as far as the cost of entry, as far as the number of competing entities going after a specific audience segment. But yet it continues to thrive, even in the day and age of streaming. It is now easier than ever to enter the game. And as the cost of entry in music drops, the amount of competition increases. And it was great. Had a good time, but learned a lot and really found that my passion was really about all the things I just described, more so than just sitting down and playing an instrument. I thrive in those business type situations. And as a musician, you are chronically broke. You have no money. So running marketing campaigns for a brand with zero money is a exciting, thrilling experience, and yet incredibly difficult. We did a lot of things, a lot of just one-on-one, hand-to-hand, just in DMs, meeting people, spreading that word, trying to figure out and learn the hard way, every way that we could, how to build a funnel, how to create LTV. And a lot of it worked, a lot of it didn't. Nowadays, I prefer to learn the smart way rather than the hard way, which is collecting a lot of data. We didn't collect a lot of data back then. When you're 22 and you're breaking into a college dormitory to put flyers all over the place, you're not really thinking about how you're going to collect a lot of this data. Nor could you. And that's a big part of marketing that is sort of left to the wayside, which is the fact that it's incredibly hard to really quantify the results of a campaign. If a campaign is not entirely digital, which I'm a big believer in merging physical and digital, it's almost impossible to really get an accurate idea. Not to mention the attribution, even through digital channels, is completely skewed. I mean, we consistently have varying insights as to where exactly audiences are coming from, what's first touch, what's last touch, and receiving data back from the various platforms and services and being a little bewildered as to what someone else would think if they were viewing this from a third party. I'll give you an example. A recent campaign that we ran, insights came back and we had, I want to say like maybe over 30% of traffic to the brand's website was attributed to Google search, over 30%. We ran zero SEO, spent no time on it. We did zero Google ads, zero at all. And yet if you didn't know that, you would assume that, oh, well, SEO was really doing its job, right? Getting that Google AdSense dollar. But that was not the case, which just goes to show that, audiences find first touch where they find it. And yet that is not the end all. Thus, to be bold and everywhere, to increase the chances of building that funnel, which is really more of a spiral. We like to view things two-dimensionally, but in reality, nothing is that way. It's three-dimensional. And when you start to view it that way, it relieves a lot of stress when you're trying to force a square peg in a round hole, and also allows you to be a little bit more spatial in how your creative works and understanding how the creative will be placed. Which goes into the big value systems, but I'll go back real quick, since one of the major things that I learned in the music industry that carried forth into my professional career is the idea that there's a very short-term and small-minded thinking that's prevalent in entities and organizations that are looking to achieve a goal. And I thought maybe this was only present in the music scene, the idea of this close competition and a disregarding of the idea of rising tides lift all boats. My band and then the people that I worked with were early recognizers that rising tides lift all boats. So instead of just trying to play shows, we would throw a show, book other bands to play with us on the show, and thus lift all of the bands together at once. This was an idea that seemed impossible to understand to a lot of my contemporaries, which I couldn't fully grasp at the time. Now, with a little more age, it seems clear that they viewed those other entities, especially locally, as competition without realizing that they aren't competing. It's not a 1 or 0 mentality, okay? It's a shared landscape. And by fighting against it, you actually shoot yourself in the foot. When if you campaign and you promote your category, like the entire category of your genre or of your industry, then you actually create a bigger win, not only for yourself, but for everybody. And then, of course, this is where the pushback comes in. I'm sure some comments, why would I spend my budget to help my competitor make money? You view it as this vicious war that it's just simply not. And it's like, well, why would I spend my money if they're not spending their money on that? Because when you spend your money and you become the voice of the category, you're the voice of the category. It elevates you. It puts you on a higher pedestal. It builds a security and an authority that these other brands will not have because they simply are too petty, which really is what it comes down to. You're just simply too petty to promote your category because you think someone else might get something out of it. And you're not going to be that guy. You view it as being taken advantage of instead of taking the advantage, which is a problem. And like I said, I thought that was maybe only in the music scene. However, as I moved into professional business, suddenly that same mentality was present, even in larger organizations. And I was almost sort of awestruck, not only by that. I mean, I think a lot of things. I had a misconception coming from the music industry and thinking that, big business is so much different. It's probably so much more professional. It's so much more organized. And the simple fact is that it's not. In fact, a lot of big business operations are slower than even the music industry, simply because they haven't had to be. There's no motivation. Whereas the music industry is, as I said, such an oversaturated, just bloody shark-infested water that fighting for survival has big consequences and short timelines. Whereas big business tends to have much longer timelines, a lot more insulation, and because of that, a lot of their tactics and their strategies are simply outdated, and they don't find it important to spend any time in refining what that is. However, that is beginning to change because, as you know, you must adapt to survive, even if it takes longer than in other industries, eventually time catches us all. And we're now seeing a lot of C-suite executives really opening their minds to new ideas. And by new ideas, I mean ideas that have already been very popular and almost over talked about for the last 6 years. You know, it's funny when a company's like, okay, we need to take social seriously. I think we need an Instagram. It's like, is it 2014? You're almost 10 years behind the curve. But at the end of the day, it comes down to whether they're willing to listen, whether they're willing to adapt, or if that fear of change will suffocate them. It happens. I mean, that's the reason why typically when companies are struggling, the first people cut are the marketers, are the agencies, are advertising. Which doesn't make any sense. I believe it was Henry Ford that said to cut advertising to save money is like stopping your clock to save time. It's fruitless. In fact, it's detrimental. And that's simply due to the fact that it's just not regarded as an important revenue driver because, going back, it's very hard to prove the results of said marketing. You know, it's very easy to attribute marketing wins to innumerable other circumstances, whether it be the season, whether it be the sales team, anything except for the marketing operations themselves. And because of that, you've seen marketers really double down on data to prove their operations, thus defending their budget. Unfortunately, sometimes that proof is skewed data, which then makes it more difficult for other agencies that are bringing in accurate data to change the mind of the person that they're talking to, because they've been deluded for so long by somebody else that wants to defend their job. It's a funny world when you cut your creative and you cut your advertising and you believe that is the best move, when it's the exact opposite. It's the exact opposite. Doubling down on that is the only way to pull yourself out of a hole. Prove me wrong. I mean, drop in the comments. Like I said, I'm viewing this through my experience, but I obviously only have my experience. I am an outsider to the corporate workspace, to the agency world. I have never worked deeply inside of any organization such as that. Never. I did spend a good amount of time in sales at another company doing outbound sales, very rudimentary boiler room style, cubicles, cold calls, lead sheets printed on colored paper, no computer, just a desk and a phone and a pile of paper. Did that for quite a long time. And I recommend anyone that's interested in marketing or sales should go through that. It's like a terrible boot camp, but it really shows you firsthand, and you can feel it, the power that marketing can make when it comes time to actually speak to a customer. And if you're relying on your sales team to be your marketers, to create demand via cold calling, you're wasting your time and you're wasting your money. And you're actually blowing the first impression that a customer could have of your business. You really don't want the first impression of your business or your brand or whatever you are to be a cold call, to be a stranger on the phone letting you know about this thing. Definitely not the way that you want to start off a relationship. So with that being said, I went from that sales job and then became sales manager at a different company, was promoted to regional sales manager. And then since I was very big into, I was a big proponent of actually providing a marketing solution for the company. There was no marketing. There was simply sales. And then they got a few people in what they called marketing, which was really just a softer version of outbound and inbound sales. And I think by being so loud and then going ahead and proving that some of those operations can work, I was elevated to a partnership position, and that company was great. That was Digital Out Home Media, which really also sort of taught me the power of physical media. Although it is digital, it is in a physical space. LED billboards, signage, things of that nature, installations, audio and video experiences in the real world. And the real power, the real win comes when you can merge those things, which is certainly where the future is going. I'm sure everyone is aware of the metaverse by now. Unless you've been under a rock, I'm sure you've heard that word. And VR and AR is certainly, without a doubt, the future of not only media, but of everything. We're not quite there yet, though. And so I greatly understand why no one's really pushing a lot of budget in those ways, because those channels are simply they're not saturated enough to have a return on investment that's even worth investing in its current state. Give it time. 2 to 4 years, you'll have some mavericks coming in there and really shaking things up. Really, really shaking things up. And I'm excited to see it. And I will be there for it when it happens. So after that sales position that I was in, that is when the pandemic hit. The business liquidated, and I was left essentially listless. This is when music also shut down, so all of the side things I still did with music ended, and now I had a blank slate. So from there is when I wanted to start Tiyami Media. And I knew I wanted to do media production, since in all of my positions involving media, especially the digital out of home, there was a big disconnect with the customer and the content. You can sell a customer an LED billboard, but then you see what they put on it, and it's not effective. The billboard is simply a medium, but the message is what makes a difference. And we were seeing this as like, oh, well, we're not really seeing the return on the thing, but you see the content. And so I realized that content and creative is the big difference. That's what matters. It's not how loud you're yelling the message, it's what is the message. What are you saying, and how are you saying it, and who are you saying it to? Basic. This is 101 stuff, but yet we've become so disconnected from those fundamentals, or they become so cloudy, or we want to answer them so quickly that we don't spend a lot of time really digging in. But when you do spend that time, and you do dig in, and you do refine, then it works. It's not rocket science. It's just marketing. We're not building a moon lander here. We're building a billboard. But regardless, it has to work. And I feel like too much of advertising and creative is simply, well, it's done. We built it. It doesn't fly. It doesn't do what it's supposed to do. Doesn't land on the moon. Whatever it is you're building, it has to work. It can't simply be done. If that makes sense. Done as in finished. As in, here is the project. Here is the product. It is in existence. That's not good enough. It has to have a function to its form, so to speak. And a lot of these sort of aha moments came over time and based upon a lot of simply learning, as I said, the hard way and not the smart way. But these things were spread across various different things. My first sales job was B2C. My sales manager job was B2B. So I got to touch both of those worlds and understand the misconceptions and the differences and the similarities between either one. And when I started Tiyami Media, I really wanted to just focus on that content rather than the medium. But I ran into the same problem on the other side, where I would create the content and the customer, client, wouldn't have the medium through which to actually provide the message in the way that it should be. So it's really two sides. It's two parts, and they're equally as important. The medium through which you are delivering the message and the message that you are delivering. And so I knew if I ever wanted to feel real satisfaction from what I'm doing, from any of these campaigns, I had to offer a solution that had both parts. Because my goal, even through the clients that I've worked with, was to achieve their goal. That's why they hired me. So we need a solution to X. I want to solve X. And when I give you the solution and you fumble it and juggle it and it doesn't solve X, even though, I provided you the service, it's all paid for, contract's complete. When I don't see X solved, it really frustrates me. And so, how can I offer a solution that's almost a surefire way to actually solve X for the client? Which is really more of an ideal than something that can be replicated. Circumstances are always going to be what they are. So that's what I wanted Tiyami Media to be. The whole purpose of the business is that it's increasingly difficult for any brand to keep up with the demand of content that it takes to exist in an omni-channel marketplace. It's nearly impossible. I mean, you used to be able to get away with hiring an intern, having him shoot some cell phone pics, and you could have a content strategy. But that is just simply not the case anymore. The demand is so high, and it's only continuing to grow. It is almost an insurmountable problem it takes entire teams to accomplish in any way that's effective. The gates are up. The days of that virality are simply gone. I mean, it's still possible, of course, to go viral, but it's much more of a lottery hit, and it means less in the long run. What does mean more, what actually matters, is consistency and presence. And that takes a lot of effort. And so that's a solution that I wanted to provide because it's something that I like to do. Yeah, I'm passionate about it. And so by offering that solution to someone who needs it, I feel like everybody wins. And obviously to do it in the most efficient way possible, to streamline that process. How do you create content for any brand in a streamlined and effective fashion? How do you nurture that content through its life cycle? Not just, creating it, downloading the file. How do you nurture it through the medium by which the customers or the audience are viewing it? How do we guide an entity to adopt that framework so that it can be optimized to create demand, to capture demand, and to create lifetime value? It's more of a mission than the statement, if that makes sense. It's really, if you shoot for the moon, you land among the stars, you're still on the way, right? But as I said, not being able to solve for X is incredibly frustrating to me. So we continue to refine the way that we go through this process. But I've really boiled it down to the three core values that if you stick to these values, you will see success immediately from where you are. If you weren't already here, you do A, B, and C, you will be at a better place, period. So let me break that down for you. First one, A, AIDA over everything. And what is AIDA? Or AIDA, however you want to say it. It's the acronym: Attention, Interest, Desire, Action. Sales 101, Marketing 101. It's the funnel, right? Attention leads to interest, leads to desire, leads to a buying action. It's a core theorem. It's not just simply a representation, but if you consistently pay attention to that funnel and to succeeding at each dimension, then it makes consistent success because you're actually paying attention to it. Too often we talk about it, it gets put up on a screen or we write it down, and then as soon as the meeting's over, it goes back to just, scramble and do whatever you can. But if you really put AIDA over everything, if you literally stop the noise, say, let's go back to AIDA. Attention, how are we doing it? Interest, what is it? Desire, how do we build it? Action, what action? And I'll be going really deep into AIDA in the future, since I have a belief that AIDA is not simply a two-dimensional 4-part funnel, but rather an idea that spirals out in a fractal effect, that if you pay attention to it and fill in that framework as it fractals, you have an instant recipe for creating whatever success you want. It really, the sky's the limit from there. But hold on, I got the hair. Gotta keep it clean, right? All right, that's A. B, be bold and everywhere. The name of the podcast, I know, right? But I truly believe that bold choices make marketing wins. You see it constantly. It just is what it is. Timid marketing does nothing. It solves none of the AIDA of pipeline. It's a waste of time. To be bold is how you stand out, which is the whole point of marketing, right? Is to stand out to the right people. You must be bold to do it. And you see it all the time. You might not even recognize what bold means. And bold is going to mean something different for everyone. To be bold within an industry. It doesn't necessarily mean flamboyant. It just means different. You know, we'll go into this a lot more in another episode because I feel like there's a lot to unpack there. But just remember to be bold. I'll give you a quick example. The Coinbase Super Bowl ad. If anyone was watching the Super Bowl. The Coinbase Super Bowl ad was a music track and a QR code that bounced around the screen, reminiscent of the old DVD logo. What a bold choice. You paid, I don't even know how much, you paid so much for this airtime. That's what you put on the screen. To get, I can only imagine the conversations that must have took place in those boardrooms. I mean, to spend that much money, and that's the creative, and to sell that. I mean, you should get an award for convincing your CFO to actually put the money behind that. It was so genius. It crashed their servers. They had such a tremendous immediate response to that ad that it crashed the servers of the website. That's like the dream of any company, to have so much attention and interest and desire and an action to go to the QR code. Being bold, baby. And to be bold and everywhere. To understand that we are moving toward an omni-channel world where the digital and the physical are merging. All people will be online. There is no more like online audience, offline audience. The whole audience is online and in the real world. We are now coexisting with a digital and physical space. And to be within all of those spaces, to not simply put all of your eggs in one basket, to say, how can we link the digital and physical in a way that creates that spiraling effect down our pipeline, bringing in sales and revenue? That's what you got to think of. Don't be confused. When I say everywhere, I don't mean you have to literally be everywhere. Everywhere that matters for your audience. Once again, who is that? Who is that? Do you know? Might want to figure that out. A, B, C, context guides creative. This is something that is maybe the most misunderstood thing in the creative field when you're working with videographers and graphic designers, is the context through which the creative will be displayed. And this goes back to my digital out-of-home days, to when you're recording music for a band, thinking that, it's going to sound great, and someone's listening to it on a cell phone speaker. That's the context. You can create a great video, full cinema, feature film, looks beautiful. It's viewed on a cell phone. And where? During a scroll? Someone's scrolling, and that's part of the context. Boom, there's your content. Is that content built for that context? Or is it just built to be beautiful? Art is beautiful. Content has a purpose. And if it can't do both, you're not letting the context guide the creative process. So put that context first, okay? You know the target audience, right? You know how they view the content, right? Do you? Knowing that, build the content to work through the context. It's not, once again, not rocket science. But this is overlooked continuously. I see it over and over and over again. Or just like still locked in the idea of a television ad as far as like pacing, as far as build and reveal, as far as story arc. All of this has to be done in context. You know? And it doesn't mean that all content has to be the same. It can't be, based upon the context. When I was doing digital out of home, it was one of the most frustrating things to watch is a company putting up on their billboard something that would run as like a newspaper ad. Just a lot of information, you know, and it's like, yeah, this would work perfect in print. But on this LED billboard, it does not work. It's too much information because you're not taking into account the audience, the viewer, the context through which the creative is viewed. You need simple, big messaging. Bam, 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 condense, condense, condense. Talk about bold. One of my favorite billboard ads was, I believe it was Budweiser. The entire billboard was just like a top-down view of a cooler, ice, and just all of the various Bud and Anheuser-Busch products in the cooler. No text, no tagline, no call to action, just that. But it was so striking and so bold that I remember it to this very day, right now. Bold choices make marketing wins. And when you combine that with the context through which the creative is viewed, you win. Once again, ABC, A to over everything, be bold and everywhere, context guides creative. Do those three things, you will instantly be in a better place. You will, maybe a huge difference to where you're at. They're not crazy ideas, but you can spend a lot of time, and we're going to spend a lot of time on this podcast going into those and even speaking to some guests about that as well. And when you view things in that way, you're going to then automatically begin to understand how creating demand builds into that top of funnel, as I talked about. Instead of this, you think lead generation is top of funnel, but it's not the tippy top. It's one step below there. There's just a great misunderstanding of what the funnel is. We don't look at it big enough. We don't look at it wide enough. We don't look at it in a three-dimensional plane. And because of that, the old ways continue to just churn and suffer and drag people down and break people's spirits and let companies and ideas just fall apart because they simply aren't adopting. And they aren't marketing in an appropriate fashion. And what I mean by that is what I was talking about earlier, as far as when you are building a market strategy, especially a demand creation strategy, you can't simply market for the product, okay? Because when you're creating demand, this is demand in its totality. So this starts with the category or the industry or the genre, depending on where you're playing, you know? From your category comes your subcategory. From your subcategory comes your niche. From your niche comes your brand. From your brand comes your product. You're like, oh my God, how many campaigns are we running? You can achieve all of that very, very, very easily in one move, but you can't leave any out, if that makes sense. If you're trying to create demand. If you're capturing demand, I mean, you don't need to worry about nearly much. I mean, if you're capturing demand, you could just market the product. You know, put your logo in the very bottom or whatever, because there's already a clear demand, not only for your solution, but for your solution specifically. If you don't have that and you're trying to create demand, well, okay, now you got to go back up to the top. If you offer a software solution, first you need to market for solving that problem, period. You need to market for software solutions of anything. Then the solution to the problem you solve. Then the niche. Okay, we solve that problem, but we solve it for law firms. Cool, there you go. Now it's your brand. Your brand solves that problem for law firms as part of this software solution, which is part of a solution. And what does your brand offer? This specific product and or service. You have now created demand for what you do specifically. But you also are now the authority. And so many brands out there, I can think of off the top of my head, they just have brand authority. As far as hair loss goes, Keeps. I'm not sponsored by them. I've never once Googled anything about hair loss. I don't know anything about it. But that brand has done such a great job of marketing that I know if anyone ever asks me, what should I do if I'm losing my hair or anything involving that, I would just send them there. Keeps. It's a good start, right? Top of mind, massive brand authority, massive category authority. And they're doing the work for everybody. That's why they're winning. I can't think of anybody else that is. I can't think of one other company that does it. Only them. How crazy is that, right? Generate, capture, nurture, create content, publish content, manage communities. This is all how you create this sort of demand engine, and you nurture it. Because the whole point is LTV. And what is lifetime value? How do you actually increase it? Who is it attributed to? Rarely marketing, I'll tell you that much. Most of the time it's attributed to the customer success team, customer support, product managers. This is what creates the value, right? Especially the return value. I think marketing plays a giant role in there, or it should. And if it does, you're going to see even more lifetime value because of the power that it has as far as messaging and communication and delivering that consistent proposition of saying, here's value, would you like it? Or here's some value, take it or leave it. No strings attached. No, but, Simply delivering the value. And what is the value? You know, that's the big question. And it's something that's also greatly misunderstood. Okay, what's the value of a CRM? Well, it lets you put all of your customers and collect the information and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, sure, that's a value. What else? It saves time. That's a value. It removes stress from your life. That's a value. Are these values being communicated? Not always, because you're very focused on the features. You're very focused on the literalness of what the product is. You know, if you're selling a screwdriver, you're just going to focus on, this is this type of metal, and it's got this, and it's got that, which is all great, and that is all value as well. It's all a part of it. But start building out a little farther, and you're going to find the real reason people buy is very rarely on the literal features. It's going to have different little cascading branches of value. And once you can recognize that, you can actually begin building more value in. And once you build more value, you want to communicate that value exists. And if you're doing it and no one else is, you win big, buddy. And that's what we're really here to do. We're to be bold, be everywhere, win big. And just because you're winning doesn't mean someone else is losing. Once again, rising tide lifts all boats. We're all just ships at sea, okay? We're all just different buildings on the block. No one's fighting against each other. And if you make a sale, it doesn't mean that you took the food out of your competitors' kids' mouths or something like that. You know, in this game, it's really just about how far can you go delivering the best possible product or service that you can? How can you delight as many people as possible? That's what business truly is at its core. It is a problem-solving machine. And if you're doing it with a good heart, with good intentions, and you're obsessed with giving it to more people, then you win. And it's a big part of even selling. You know, if anyone's been out there in sales and you were forced, well, maybe not forced, that's a strong word, but say you were in a position where you're selling a product that you don't believe in. Maybe you've seen how the sausage is made, and all of this jargon that they gave you is just, it's total BS. And you have to sell it. How successful are you at it? You know, if your heart is really not in it, or if you're just selling something that's so vapid and pointless, but yet that's the quota, how hard is it? It's difficult. But when you sell something that you wholeheartedly believe in, it's actually quite easy because it's real, it's authentic. And you're going to be more creative and you're going to be more excited because you know what it can do. Which is why, I love selling digital out-of-home media. I knew what it could do. I saw it firsthand. So when I'm selling it and I'm trying to explain how it works, it doesn't feel sloggy. It doesn't feel painful. And that's what you really want out of your business. If you're an entrepreneur, if you're even going to work for a business that makes you so excited, that you fully believe in wholeheartedly. Don't get taken advantage of now. But when you are selling a product or doing a service that you wholeheartedly believe in, it makes everything easier. It really reduces the entire stress. It creates more success, not only for yourself, but for the business and for the category. Rising tide, which I believe a lot of people go into charity work and nonprofit work, which is fantastic. If your heart is in saving animals and you're there doing it, you know how much it matters. You do it. Maybe you're digging wells. Maybe you're providing Meals on Wheels. You name it. You're saving trees. Something you know is important and you can put your entire passion into. If you have that same drive behind business acumen, basically, then you're going to win. If you don't have that, you're going to hate your business or you're going to hate your job, no matter what it is. If you just I see a lot of entrepreneurs, and I hesitate to even use that word for them. They're more like opportunists than entrepreneurs. They simply see an opportunity to make money, regardless of the value that it provides to anyone, regardless of the solution being, actually working. As we said, it just exists. It doesn't actually work, but we can probably sell it. That's opportunism. It's not entrepreneurship. You're not an entrepreneur. I'm sorry. If you're a crypto investor, you are not an entrepreneur. You're an investor. Now, what you do with those investments might be entrepreneurial or it might be opportunistic. You need to decide which one you are. If you're an entrepreneur, make sure that your business is something that you love to its core. Okay? Not just something you like the idea of, because otherwise you might get trapped in a place that's going to lose you a lot of money. If you're not totally sure, try it on a small level. See how it feels and go from there. If that's not important to you, then just be an opportunist. But I doubt you're really going to be happy. You're probably going to create a working environment that's bad for all the employees. You're probably going to create a product that disappoints your customers. You're just going to be a big old opportunistic disappointment. You're going to make everyone frown, and then you're going to grab the bag and run for the door. We see it all the time, but I want to change the conversation around those people to say good and bad entrepreneurs and opportunists. They're not even in the same category. An entrepreneur is obsessed with a mission. It's obsessed with solving a problem. in a way that's repeatable and easily understandable for the wide audience that it serves. At its core, it's about making the world a better place. Not through a non-for-profit, but it's making the world a better place. And I don't think that has to come for free. So everyone, thank you for tuning in and listening to this first episode. I know it was a little bit scattered. I know we were all over the place, but we got some big ideas out there. Once again, jump in those comments. Let me know what you think. Let me know any topics you'd like us to hit on in the future. Well, we'll be deep diving into ADA, into what bold choices are, how you can use them, into context and creative, even a guideline that can help you maybe understand what to do within each context when you go into a creative meeting or if you're a creator yourself. And hopefully we'll be talking to a lot of different people that can also illuminate each one of those things. We'll be going through the ADA framework. We'll be talking about different things happening right now as far as marketing campaigns that I enjoy, as well as a lot of misconceptions that can come up. So drop your questions, drop your comments, be ruthless. If you like it, like it. If you didn't like it, let me know why, and be as honest as you can. Once again, I'm Mike Heffron. This is Be Bold and Everywhere. Thank you.